You get that a lot that people can stop at any time. I don't engage in that conversation because I can't convince them at that level of
Hmm.
unhealthiness. Maybe when they get healthier, maybe they have some sobriety under the belt, they're stable, then we can have that conversation. But to engage in that conversation when they're in the height of their substance use, when they're mind altered, you are going to lose that battle because you're arguing with that disease. To me, that is wasted breath.
Doctor, thank you so much for coming on. Now, introduce yourself, tell us your name, where you're from, and what you do for work, and what your views are on mental health.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both, Samantha and Ashley, for having me on here. I think it's great what you're doing in terms of spreading mental health messages. We need it more than ever. So I'm really, really happy to always come across people that are open to collaborating. And like I said, setting that message out there. We need it more than ever. So thanks again. For me, my name is Brian Licuanan. I'm a licensed psychologist, my PhD. I practice out of California. I do 100% telehealth. So working with communities and hospitals contracted with various entities across the state. I'm also in private practice, and I see clients. I do have a specialization in insomnia. I've worked a lot with substance use disorder, working in treatment facility, and now carving out a niche as a family crisis strategist, helping families who have a loved one who is resisting any type of help. And so I'm really, really trying to really support families, get the help that they need, and help them realize that there's still things they can do. And so, with that said, that came about with also for the past 15 years, I've been conducting knowledge forums and support groups for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Been doing that for quite a while. And also, more recently, I came on board with PALS, which stands for Parents of Addicted Loved Ones. And they provide support for family members who have loved ones struggling with addiction. So, and of course, media appearances, articles, and of course, a book that I released May 1st for a strategy guide to get loved ones help, how to get your resisting loved one into treatment. And that book was based on a lot of my work with clients in the NAMI setting, PALS, treatment centers, outpatient, and the talks that I give on various capacities. So that's a little bit of a quick nutshell of about me and what I do on that level.
Ooh, I have
Wow.
so many questions, and I'm so
All
excited.
right.
Okay, so
You're a busy man.
yeah,
Try to,
literally.
yeah.
Now, well, before we get into anything, though, I do want to know, like, what motivated you to want to be in the mental health field in the first place?
Well, it wasn't something I actually do write about. It's in the beginning of my book was how my journey wasn't a straight path. And the reason why I write about that is because I feel there's a lot of people out there who, when they struggle or feel kind of helpless or hopeless, I say stay in the fight. So that is at least somewhat what I can relate when people are struggling out there and feeling very lost and hopeless, is that we have to dig in and stay in the fight. And so yeah, I mean, I had all kinds throughout my 20s, was very uncertain. There was law enforcement that came across that I was wanting to pursue. There was the medical field where I was taking all the pre-medical classes. And then I actually went originally to a PhD program in a field of psychology called industrial organizational psychology, which has nothing to do with therapy. These are your consultants that work in human resources and work on behavior in the workplace. So they analyze data and develop instruments and all kinds of measuring tools for improving culture and efficiency and so forth in the workplace. And then I realized that just wasn't a good fit for me. It's a great field. And so I stumbled upon the clinical field, which I did work prior to graduate school. I was working at a residential treatment facility for adolescents. And then I was told by various people, like, hey, you should think about being a psychologist. And it's just one of those things that you plant there. And it germinated one day when I was in that program. Luckily, they had the clinical program as well in the department. So I transitioned and haven't looked back since. So I always knew that helping others, being of service. I grew up in a healthcare family. So I had a sense that that was my arena. I just didn't know exactly where. And finally, it wasn't until my early 30s that I finally solidified what I think I should be doing. And I do believe this is what I should be doing.
And I'm wondering, like, throughout your whole journey, were there any mental health struggles that maybe you were going through that motivated you to want to be in the field?
Definitely during those 20s was a very difficult time. And that's what I also write about as well. for people that were just struggling with just feeling very lost. And so I really, really couldn't find what my purpose was, what were my skills, and what I'm supposed to be doing. So that was that. And during one of my original PhD program, I definitely suffered a severe bout of sleep deprivation. And for about 3 months, I was not sleeping due to stress and responsibilities and tasks I had to do. And I really firsthand felt the impact of sleep deprivation. And that lasted for about 3 months. And mental health, as you know, some type of sleep issue is usually a co-occurring condition for people struggling with conditions such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder. And so it's a very important. So I really, really was fascinated about the importance of sleep and to help people who struggle with that, since I definitely firsthand experienced that. And of course, some family and friends struggling with mental health on various capacities was also something that led to my driving force to pursue this branch of the field of healthcare.
I have a brother who struggles with alcohol addiction. And I think as of lately, he's at a point where he knows that he needs to get help, but it seems like he's been very hesitant on actually seeking the help.
Okay.
Now, what would you say for people who like know they need to get the help, but are very just resistant or just hesitant, don't know where to start when it comes to seeking that help?
Great question. And that's where a lot of people stay stuck. And if you're familiar with the stages of change, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where I find most people, right? There's the pre-contemplation, and then there's where people don't even realize that there's a problem, right? Like, for example, your brother, like, hey, I'm drinking and I'm drinking a lot, but it's not really problematic that he thinks it's not. And then, of course, there's the contemplation phase where you start to realize, okay, there's a problem here, but I just don't know how to go about it. In the preparation stage, where, okay, there's a problem. So come January 1st, I'm going to really work on getting on a healthy recovery or sobriety plan. And so that's where most people stay stuck. And of course, you have the action phase where you actually take action, and then the maintenance phase where you maintain that level of, in that case, sobriety recovery. And so most people stay stuck. Well, the big part is that insight that, oh, this is a problem, right? Or hey, you have a mental health condition that needs some attendance, or your substance abuse is a little out of hand. A lot of people I find stuck, whether it be in my clinical practice, is they know there's a problem, whether that they got feedback from other people, family members, loved ones, or losing jobs, or they just realize that something's not right, and that's where they get stuck. And so they get stuck between there and how to prepare. So one thing I think is really important, like for your brother, for me to communicate for not just your brother, but anyone who's struggling out there, is just to let them know to have hope and to trust that there is a process out there that really works. And just saying, admitting that it is a problem is a huge step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And to ask for help. One gentleman referred to it as the 1,000-pound phone, which is true, right? It's just too hard to pick up. And a lot of people, what struggles or what's a barrier to getting help are things like fear and guilt and shame, right? They feel humiliated. They feel guilty for what they've done or what they're doing, and they're scared. They're scared if they can get better or what the change is going to look like. So I tell people, right, is that I've worked with a lot of dire cases of people with severe mental health conditions, substance abuse issues, and they're able to get very healthy and restart their life. So for your brother is to really have hope and to be okay to say, I do need help, and surround yourself and ask those people who you know care about you for that help and guidance and seek that professional help.
And it's so funny because I've had this conversation with him a lot more recently now because I've noticed that he's been drinking every single
Hmm.
day. Right. And I'm like, are you okay? What is going on? You can
Hmm.
talk to me. You don't have to do this alone.
Hmm.
Right. And with him, he says, like, it's just so much easier to drink because I'm just numbing my emotions and it's just
Yeah.
easier to just do that. But what is it really doing for you though? Like really sit and think about what is the alcohol doing for you. Instead, it's like you're hungover every day, like you're not really able to function. Like, what is it really doing for you?
Hmm.
And then he was like, okay, but like, what if I stop though? What is my life gonna look like if I stop drinking? And I'm like,
Hmm.
what do you think it's gonna look like? And then he got quiet and he was just like, well, it's not really doing anything for me right now. It's not making it things better. Instead, it's making it worse. And I was like, there we go,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. And
And
there's the
we,
self-insight. Yeah.
yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a science between all of it too, with just the neurons in your brain and how alcohol and even drugs can affect your brain function. And then a lot of people who are addicts believe that, like your brother, they believe that they are not going to be able to function, or if anything, they don't remember how to function previously to the alcohol use. And so that's probably the fear kicking in that they don't know exactly what to do, that they're going to have to relearn everything
Hmm.
all over. And the thought of, let's say, starting a new career, starting over in general, that's a massive fear. And that takes time to get used to. And for somebody who's struggling, that's probably what's going through their mind.
Exactly. Samantha, you hit on a lot of points that I speak to. The first one is this. I ask people all the time. It's one of my must knows. I have 25 must knows that I talk about and write about. And so one of them is when I ask either family members or people who are struggling with a substance or even a behavior that they engage in that's not healthy for them, I ask them, do you know why your loved one, or do you know why you use that substance or engage in that behavior that they've tried to lessen? In three words. Number one, very simple, is because it works, right? It works for what it was originally intended. And that's why people have their drug of choice or behavior of choice over others, because it works for what its original intention was. And exactly, I look at substances as just a sophisticated tool, an available tool for some type of relief or healing. And of course, it works for originally intended, but over time it becomes counterproductive and dysfunctional. That's why I refer to it. I use a lot of metaphors, at least that helps me and to help people to visualize and understand. I look at it as a dysfunctional life preserver. It's a ratty one that's it keep you afloat for a little bit, but sooner or later, if you rely on it, it's going to sink you. And so I look at that. And so that's where the thing is where people struggle to understand sometimes from whether it be a family perspective, why the loved one's struggling and can't get rid of that. Yes, Samantha, you alluded to, there's definitely a chemical and medical, physical dependence on as well, especially with alcohol, right? You know that people can die from severe alcohol withdrawals, and there's sometimes need some psychiatric medication to mitigate some of the symptoms. But people that are afraid that this is what they truly believe, whether it be rational or not, that is the thing that's keeping them alive, keep them afloat, keep them functioning because it works. And so our job is to help them discover a healthier life preserver. Because what happens when you find something that you believe works, everything else you close the door on, right? People that are using alcohol, like your brother, I don't know your brother, but I'm only going to make some assumptions, but I doubt he's practicing everyday mindfulness techniques. I doubt he is surrounding himself with healthy, encouraging people. I doubt he's surrounding himself with positive thoughts and optimism, right? And so I'm sure he's not meditating every morning, right? And so that's what happens is when you rely on thing, that's the only tool in your tool belt. And so that's where a treatment process or some type of help will give you options. And one of the last things I want to say is I talk about the different phases of the recovery process. And what I talk about phase one is the first 30 to 90 days. That is the most difficult because that's where a lot of changes take place. And that's where a lot of fear takes place because they're resistant. They have medical withdrawals from the substance. They're fearful. But once they get past that window, they start healing because they distance themselves from that substance. If they need medication, they're eating, they're sleeping, they're talking about their issues, they're creating fellowship with other people, they can get out of that window. And I've had people in that first 30 to 90 days that wanted to end their life. And after some time, they're like, wow, there's some life to live. Or people that they feel like they're never going to give up a substance. They start to realize, like, wow, I didn't realize that journaling, meditating, or mindfulness techniques can be just as impactful than my substance. And so that's what I talk about is how do we get that loved one into that window of the first 30 to 90 days? Because it's critical. And that's where like your brother says, like, well, gosh, is that I literally get people when they stop drinking alcohol for a week or two, like, oh my God, it's worse off getting sober than drinking. And well, of course, because their body has become dependent on it and that's all they know. But they have to be put in that time where their body and minds can start healing
Mhm.
and find new ways to lessen those symptoms. So So anyway, you
Mm.
talk about a lot, you highlight a
Yeah.
lot of things that I discuss and talk about, so I wanted to touch upon those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
also when it comes to your book, right? So like me, so I live with my dad and my brother. And me and my dad, we feel helpless sometimes because like we don't know what to do, where to go because he's so resistant on wanting to because I think it's just because like he's scared of what life is going to look like without the
Okay.
alcohol and stuff, you know? How can families help their loved ones who are resistant on,
Mhm.
seeking that help?
Let me ask you, how old your brother?
He's 36 question mark.
Okay. Okay. So there's another saying, one of my must knows, when someone's struggling chronically, chronically meaning a long time, right? Now, how long has he been drinking, like at this level that's been problematic?
So it's been problematic since he was 18. I think that just much more recently, though, it's been like every single day as of recently.
Okay. So 18 years. And
Hmm.
what I tell people a lot is when I ask family members or loved ones when they're struggling for a long period of time, and I ask them, do you know why your loved one or do you know why you continue to struggle? And it's simple. It's because you can, because they can, right? And so what's happening is coming from a loving place, there really is no motivation for him to get healthy
Hmm.
because he's living at home. Does he work?
Yes, he does.
He works, he has a place to live, and there's no motivating factor there for him to want to change because what happens, they get very comfortable. It sounds like for
Hmm.
18 years. And the thing is, in my work with people, anyone that makes change, I would say probably 10% or less are they have some spiritual moment or awakening or aha moment, or they have a tragic event happen where they're going to get sober. I say that's about 10% of the time. 90% of the time, where the bell-shaped curve where most of the people fall into, that they are finding themselves in some situations where they're pretty much have the choice and forced to get help. And by the way, research shows that people who are forced to get help and treatment can be just successful because of like that 30 to 90-day window, is because they just need to go through some type of healing process where they could change their mindset and how they feel and think. But yeah, your brother, the scary thing is that if there's no immediate changes and nothing happens like an aha moment
Hmm.
or some interventional event in his life that says, wow, I need to get healthy, he will be like this for 18 more years. So at 54 years old, he can wake up and he's still in the same place because there's no motivation to
Hmm.
change. He has his sister and his dad in his life, in his mind,
Hmm.
that there's no reason to really change. And sometimes we try to love someone or help them rationalize out of it. Well, don't you know this is hurting people? Can't you see what it's doing to your life? People don't see that at that level. Rationally, they know something's wrong. They know that maybe perhaps they're dying, but they're too scared, shameful to take those steps. And so honestly, if I was to do an intervention with not your brother, but you and your dad, is that you tell him, we love and care about you. We'll always be here for you. It's just that we can't continue to support this lifestyle any longer. You staying here with us and you doing the same thing, we're doing more harm than good is because we're co-signing this lifestyle. So we're asking for you to do, we want to work with you. Come January, we need you to make a decision on what you're going to do about a healthier plan. If not, right, then you have to make some decisions on other living arrangements because it's
Hmm.
not only affecting you, it's also affecting us. We can't support this lifestyle any longer. That's the language you use. And so now you're not telling him stop drinking. You're not telling him get out. You're telling him that you have a choice. And
Hmm.
so that's what I work with people. It's called assertive love.
Would you say, as somebody in this field, that drinking from an early stage on, does that have an effect on somebody who is an alcoholic today? Or
Absolutely.
or is that more of a behavior that is learned?
Well, both, but absolutely, when someone drinks at a very young age, the risk factor skyrockets for having a substance addiction, and even if it's accepted culturally, right? And
Hmm.
so, yeah, just because something's accepted culturally doesn't mean that they're impervious to certain risk factors, right? You can have a culture that eats a bunch of fatty foods, right? Doesn't mean that you're impervious to high cholesterol or heart attacks. And so, yes, definitely engaging in a substance, even if that, to be honest with you, it makes it even more problematic when it's accepted culturally, right? Is
Hmm.
because it's a part of your identity. Obviously, your culture is part of your identity. It's normalized. And then when you come out of that, not only are you dealing with a physical dependence, the emotional dependence, but now there's this cultural part of it. There's a lot of myself, there's a lot of one's self identity built into that. And of course, the Hispanic culture as well. I think it's similar. I'm Filipino. Filipino culture, very communal family, right? And we don't give up on our loved ones. In our culture, hey, if you don't have to move out and you're 40 years old and you're still single, hey, no one's going to
Mhm.
have you move out of the house.
Yes, that's very much a thing in Hispanic
Yeah,
culture as
yeah.
well.
So it's that communal part, and just because it's cultural doesn't always make it the healthiest. And
Mhm.
I during one of my NAMI groups, I had this Chinese gentleman who had an older brother who had some type of mental health condition, and then this older brother who was had a untreated mental health condition was being very verbally and maybe physically abusive to his mom, elderly mom. And the younger brother came to my NAMI group and said, "Hey, I don't know what to do." I said, "Have you talked to your brother about it?" And he was like, "No, no, 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 you can't talk about it because in our culture, that's shaming your elders." And I said, "Okay, I understand that culturally, but what's the consequences of your culture? Because sometimes culture beliefs, although may be okay and normalized for the culture, it may put someone at risk, just like this, drinking, as a risk." And so he never came back. And so I really wonder. And he was just the cultural belief that we don't confront our elders, despite him potentially physically and emotionally abusing his mom, trumped talking to him and getting him the help that he needs. So I've worked with a lot of Hispanic cultures, as you have or continue will, and you see a lot of them get help too. They finally break that cultural belief that, my God, I'm killing my family, I'm killing myself. That's that aha moment that trumps that. But those aha moments, like I said, is 10% of the time where they find a higher power, find Jesus. Maybe there's a medical condition or maybe a loss of life or impending divorce, but that's only 10% of the time. The most of the time is they have to be put in a certain situation where they're made to make that choice and decision
Mm.
and forced into that. See, like I said, a lot of Hispanic cultures, family members make that realization, but it's when
Mhm.
someone says, "You know what, you can't talk to the kids. You know what, I'm done with this marriage, or you can't live here anymore." And that is usually the impetus for at least this realization that change has happened. So Ashley, yeah, with your brother, like I said, I know it's a scary thought, but he's okay dealing with this. It sounds like, if anything, anything that you say your dad, he's been inoculated by that. Like, hey, don't you see what you're doing? Don't you realize? Hey, we love you. Don't you care? Don't you want to live longer? At that height of the disease, they don't grasp that anymore. All they're seeing is this thing is what is giving me relief. And it's going to be hard to convince me that there's other things out there that can give me that. And that's why they have to be put in a situation
Yeah,
where they
and
have that realization.
I actually had some thoughts from before the interventions that you would use for me and my dad, right? So my mom passed away 2 years ago,
No, I'm
and
sorry.
thank you so much. And so she was very close with my brother. My mom would coddle him a lot and
Mm.
enable a lot of the behaviors. And
Okay.
honestly, if it were up to my dad would have thrown him out when he was like 18 years old.
Yeah,
But my mom was like, no, don't do it, my poor baby, you know what I mean?
got it.
So it just never happened. And so my mom would defend him, whatever he was doing, always defended him. And so then I would always joke like, this man is going to be here until he's like 50 or something, because of
Yeah.
just, you know what I mean? So it's been really hard. It's been really hard to have those difficult, because I have told my dad like, all right, like we're probably gonna have to like put our foot down and be like, okay, exactly, like come January, like you might have to figure out a different living situation and things like that, right? But then now my dad hears my mom in the back of his head
Yeah.
saying like don't do it, and
Yeah.
because my dad always said like, if something happens to you, I promise this boy is going to be out of the house. But now it's a different story, because now
Yeah.
he hears her in the back of his head saying like, don't do it. There's a lot of hesitation on my dad's end too, just because like he feels bad, like he thinks, okay, what would my wife think? So it is hard, it's
And
definitely
that
hard.
and that's what I say metaphorically. I look at the disease as this beat up car, and its oil and gas is fear and guilt. And
Mm,
so exactly that. So it's either fear that, oh my God, she's gonna die on the street, she's gonna get trafficked, or he's
mm,
going to be homeless, or it's guilt.
mm,
Oh my God, I wasn't there during this time of life. That's why they're like this, or we divorced too early. I remarried and brought in that step parent, too quickly. And guilt is very, very powerful. So this disease, I personify this disease as this separate entity. You take out your brother's disease, I guarantee you, without you telling me, he's probably a very passionate, loving, funny person. But that disease, we've got to manage that disease. And so that disease, I personify it as with these entities, and they call it the terrorist in the home. A psychiatrist who was running the NAMI group before me for 18 years. He transitioned and was starting services in Africa, psychiatric services. So I took over. He was also in the military prior to being a psychiatrist, and so he'd use military terms. And he said the disease is like a terrorist in the home. It is. What does a terrorist do? It holds you in fear. It makes you alter your lifestyle. You walk on eggshells. And that's what it does. It's the one running the household. And this disease loves you to stay away from it. And so, like, there's different levels that you would do an intervention, like with your brother. Some levels are like if this person is really being harmful to persons, he's threatening to harm them, then, or they're psychotic, and you're worried about it. Intervention is no, we're going to call the police. You need to be I don't know what they call it in Jersey, but here it's 5150, where it's a mandatory 3-day hold and something like that, or call the police. And there's other interventions in between, like, hey, we've talked to you before. This needs to happen to that initial conversation, like, hey, we're concerned about you. Let's sit down and come up with a plan together. So I break it down into three different levels, depending on how the person's responding, what you've tried, and what the needs are.
So I think I need to speak with my dad about just like actually having those conversations
Yeah.
because you're right. Like if it doesn't happen, he's gonna be like this for another
Hmm.
18 years and
Yep.
nothing is gonna change.
Nothing's
And
going to
and
change.
he always says, my mom's always wanted me to go back to school, so I'm gonna take initiative and go back to school, which he has been doing.
Hmm.
But I tell him like what she would really want you to do is to stop drinking,
Hmm.
and but that's still just like the
Hmm.
hardest part for him.
Is he aware of other like medicine assisted treatment like naltrexone and Vivitrol and other type of medications for that? I mean, are you aware of those?
Yes. And I have told him so many options that he can do, but it's just kind of just goes in one ear
Yeah.
and out the other. It sucks because like in the moment I think that he's like receiving everything that
Hmm.
that I'm saying, but you know.
And like I said, it can go one ear out the other because it can. There are no implications to that. And so, like I said, people think an intervention is this really aggressive, do it or not, tough love. And maybe on some instances that is, but that's where I try to communicate with him. It doesn't have to be that way as well. You can be assertive and loving, still come from a loving place, but yet be assertive. Majority of interventions can be in a collaborative effort, right? It's going
Mhm.
to be like the 50% where no, this is really, really out of hand. This person's threatening to kill himself or herself or
Yeah.
hurt somebody else, or this person's going to do something really, really bad. And that's what I call the imminent crisis. But most of the time, those interventions can happen earlier on.
My brother also struggles with insomnia too. He uses alcohol to help him go to sleep, even if it's like a beer or something. Like he
Mhm.
has to have it in order to go to sleep. So it's even hard to have those type of conversations in the first place, anyways, because of the fact that my dad communicates a certain way, and it's just like I have to tell my dad sometimes like dad, take it down a notch. Like his communication with me is so much different than his communication with
Got
my
it.
brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but does your dad drink?
No,
Okay, so well, that's a tough thing. And
it
like I
is
said,
hard.
as long as the substance is in the picture, part of the equation, that issue is not going to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't. And your brother might have to detox.
Yep, I've been told.
What would you say to people who say I could stop at any time I want?
Well, that's their insight, right? And so one thing that I do, and I have learned, is I don't try to convince someone of what they are or what they aren't. Whether it be an addict, whether it be they have a diagnosis, whether they have to take meds or stop or so forth. What I do is I give them options in a preview of what another option could look like. And so one thing that I always like to ask people so far when they have those belief systems is, what do you want? Well, I want to have a happy family. I want to get along better with my partner. I want to have a better relationship with my son or daughter. I said, how has your drinking or your use, whatever it is, behavior, helped that? And so that's one way to help them realize. Or sometimes, if you really want to be sort of a conversation halter or pauser, is say, well, let me ask you this. How has your way been working for you so far?
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes that could be a trigger for them. So you have to do it mindfully and gently, not sarcastically or condescendingly, but I'm just, really curious, like, tell me so far for 18 years, how has that been working for you? Well, I've been in jail, I lost my job and so forth. And so that those are so sometimes that's one way to do it. And but yeah, those people that say, yeah, I can stop anytime, but to go down the rabbit hole, well, no, you can't. Let's see you. I dare you. Let's go ahead and try it. Go ahead. No, you can't. There's research that shows it independence. Look at all these neurons, and no, you are going to lose that battle at least in the patience level, or argument wise, because you're arguing with that disease that I can stop at any
Mhm.
time, and you get that a lot, especially with people that use meth. I don't know why, but people with meth, like, oh my God, I'm just using a little bit. I'm just using a bump here and there. I'm not using much at all. But you get that a lot, that people can stop at any time. I don't engage in that conversation because I can't convince them at that level of
Mhm.
unhealthiness. Maybe when they get healthier, maybe they have some sobriety under the belt, they're stable, then we can have that conversation. And then you see
Hmm.
people say, like, you know what, I can't stop at any time. But to engage in that conversation when they're in the height of their substance use, when they're mind altered, good luck. To me, that is wasted breath. Speaking, I was fortunate to be on a podcast the other week, which I
Mhm.
think would be one you might want to listen to. It's called the Hopeaholics,
Mhm.
and they're here in Southern California. There's three of them. They're all in recovery and sobriety, and they have quite a few treatment centers here. And so they talk about the gentleman who started it. He lost, well, he's been in doing treatment centers for a while, but he started the podcast 2 years ago because his son-in-law died of fentanyl overdose, his daughter's husband. And so he died of that. And that was the passion to podcast, to really battle fentanyl and to really, really help people. And actually they've done so well spreading their message that their podcast, I think, is one that is the top in substance addiction. So yeah, if you ever, type in my name and Hopeaholics, Hope, Hope, and then like aholics. And so they talk a lot about the resistant, what do we do, the guilt and everything like that. And so I think and they're entertaining too. They're younger and sort of, younger in their 30s and so forth. And so it's an engaging conversation, but really, really a lot of good knowledge came out of that conversation.
Substance use aside, what would you tell people in general who are hesitant to mental health treatment to see a therapist? Because I know some people who they're afraid to see a therapist because like it's a scary thing for them. They
Of
hate the idea
course.
of like somebody just like writing down notes and
Hmm.
and being like, and how does that make you feel? Which obviously it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like that. But what would you say to those people?
Well, I would say again, really trust that there's a process. A lot of times people base a conclusion on limited experience. Oh, well, God, my cousin took medication and it was horrible for her, or my friend went to treatment, a bad experience, or just like anything else, we create these foregone conclusions based on very, very limited sample size and so forth. And so people will have that, like, oh, well, God, I tried therapy as a kid and it was horrible,
Mhm.
or I knew someone. And that's where I say, not everyone is the same, right? And to really, really trust the process, and that the therapy is designed to be a safe place. And I look at therapy as more of a coach, a person to provide a safe place and to help you find different skills and several insights in your life to take your life to the next level. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and tell people that it's not gonna get uncomfortable. Anybody in life who has succeeded, whether you be you in graduate school, whether it be an athlete, whether it be someone trying to get healthier physically or diet wise, there's a level of push, grit, and discomfort. And going through this process of intervention is very, very uncomfortable. So I try to teach people that don't stray away from discomfort, because a lot of learning can take place and growth can take place from discomfort. So to tell your brother, like, yeah, therapy is going to be completely rah rah, you don't have to talk about anything tough. No, it's going to be that, but yeah, it's going to be a supportive and safe environment as well. So like I said, it's easier said than done to tell people to trust in the process, but what do you have to lose, right? How has my way been working for me so far? What do I truly want in life? I doubt if
Mhm.
you ask your brother, what do you truly want in life? He's not going to say, well, I just kind of want to die and wither away and not succeed.
Mhm.
And no, a lot of times we assume that people don't want help. They present that way, but they just don't know how to get the help, how to ask for it, and what the help's going to look like for them.
Doctor, you obviously do so many things. You have your book and you're doing a whole bunch of jobs, right? So what do you do to practice self-care?
The way I usually address that question is originally there was four. Now I think it's five. I'll say five now. Five areas of one's life. That's the physical part.
Mhm.
Physical is what you do with your body, right? What do you put into it? How you treat it? How you nourish it? Do you exercise? There's the mental slash emotional, of course, the mental. What are you doing on that level? How do you think? What do you address with your feelings? How do you deal with events in your life? Then there's the social. Social are relationships, romantic, family, friendships. Career one is what you do in your career. That used to fall under social, but I separate it now career because career's one third of our life, minimally speaking. If you're not happy in your career, you're not happy in other areas of your life. And then last one's spiritual, right? Spiritual can mean a higher power, a greater process, but it can also mean your higher purpose and meaning in life. So those are the five areas that I think are critically important that account for 20% of our well-being. And if you are neglecting one or more of those, chances are it's having an impact on your other areas. And so for me, I try to tend to all of those. My career, right? My spiritual side, I do believe in a higher power. Mental, I always try to think positive, optimistically, right? Manifest positivity. Physically, I like to work out. I like to eat healthy. And one thing I also do that I like to always talk about is I compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a martial art. And I'm been training that for 7 years, and it's been a life and game changer for me. And because it taps every single one of those, the mind, body, spirit, social, and so forth. But those are the five areas of life
Mhm.
that I think that we all have to attend to. Because if you're only just focusing on your physical but avoiding your mental, you know how that is. If you're just doing all
Yeah.
mental but you neglect your physical, if you're all working career, right, but neglect your physical part. So I think all those are the five areas that I have found in my work and life experiences that are critically important to attend to for overall healthy well-being.
There's always this joke, at least like in the clinics. We preach a lot about mental health, but are we actually practicing it? Kudos to you for actually going
Thank
out
you.
there and doing it. And also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I know I have a family member who also did that for the longest time, and their life has not been easy. And that's something that actually helped them a lot through that struggle. So I know for a fact that can help.
Very healing, especially for women with physical trauma, for kids with ADHD. They did research with them on even spectrum disorders, because it talk about mindfulness skills because you have to be mindful and you have to be solution oriented. So it's an amazing martial art. I've done martial arts before, and it's practical too in terms of self-defense. For me, there's nothing wrong with other martial arts, but I don't think you can kickbox when you're like in your late 40s and 50s and 60s and taking head kicks and body shots.
Mhm.
But jujitsu, it's practical, it's leverage, it's submissions, and it's designed for the weaker or smaller person to be able to defeat or at least manage themselves against a bigger, stronger person. You can't say that same with other martial arts as much because you can get a large guy that's 250 pounds and maybe a very, very skilled boxer female that's 110 pounds. That big guy can probably handle. But in jiu-jitsu, you get a lot of smaller females choke out bigger, strong men. I see it all the time. Young teenage males, take on bigger people twice their size, and it works. So appreciate your honesty about that because I don't always practice what I preach either, but I try. I'm more diligent in trying because it just makes me more content and holistic when I am practicing what I do preach.
Doctor, thank you so much. Like I said, I really truly do believe that people will come into my life for a reason. And this, I don't know,
Thank you. I
I
believe
needed
that
this.
too.
Yeah, and I feel like I needed to hear these things. I needed to talk to you today to figure out a game plan for my brother because
Mhm.
this has been weighing on me very, very heavily in the
Yeah.
last few weeks because of how bad it's gotten.
Hmm.
So I really needed this. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time.
Th-
I really appreciate it, and I hope that we continue to stay in touch.
I appreciate that as well. And good luck to you and continue to have hope out there. Okay.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends and family. You can listen to this on Spotify and Apple Music, Therapists Unmasked. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok, Therapists_Unmasked. And Doctor, if you want to share any of your socials and where people can find you,
Sure,
please do.
sure. My website, and I'm assuming maybe you're going to drop that down in
Yep,
the
absolutely.
description, but drbrianlicuanan.com is my website. You can see a little bit of the service I provide, a little excerpt of my book, and links to where you get my book, and then all my media appearances on there, whether it be news channels, talk shows, articles that I've written. So there's that. And on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Licuanan, where you can find videos and mental health shorts and so forth.
Amazing. All right, everybody. We will see you guys next time, okay?
Thank you. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.